My fiancé and I are about to get married, but when I find out he's cheating on me with my best friend, I come up with a plan to humiliate them both. I don't know if any of you know what it's like to be cheated on, but if you do, I think you'll relate to the story I'm about to tell. In fact, you may even vicariously live through it. Because it's not a story about being cheated on, it's a story about revenge. It's a story about me finding out how my ex-fiancé was cheating on me with someone very near and dear, and how I systematically ruined both of their lives piece by piece. You can call me Mel, 23, and this man in question is named Tim, 24. I met Tim through my best friend Nina 3 years ago next week. They were both working in the same university library, and she invited him out for drinks with us one night after work. There was a bar called Marlowe's that had karaoke night every Tuesday, and Tim's impassioned Queen covers impressed me in their boldness, if not their falsetto. The boy sounded nothing like Freddie Mercury. We fell for each other hard, and I knew after a year that this was going to be my guy. Still, you never know what can happen, and boy did I find that out later. He waited another year to propose, and the last year has been nothing but planning for our massive wedding that I insisted on. I was shocked by how much I needed a big wedding. I honestly never even thought I would get married, and now that it was happening, I was like some little girl going through her Disney princess phase. Of course, Tim seemed totally disinterested in the whole thing. He just wanted to do whatever made me happen, money be damned. His family is totally loaded, you see. They're old money, something about the shipping industry going back to the 1800s. Of course, that doesn't mean they helped him out any. They're one of those rich families who insist their children make their own way in the world. Which is a fine and noble enough thing to do, but it's a bit of a drag when I'm the one who has to pick up the slack. Tim doesn't have a job, you see. Well, it's not like he's a deadbeat or something, but he decided to go back to school to get his MFA and I'm basically supporting the both of us. That's not actually a problem. I was lucky enough to snag one of the few available jobs in my field right out of college. But what is a problem is that he's hardly showing up to his classes, is keeping vampire hours, and most importantly, I've now caught him cheating on me with 2 women. I'll start with the first, because it's just so predictable that it would be funny if it weren't so sad. Tim is a teaching assistant in an English class, and apparently he and some undergrad named Taylor have really hit it off. I started getting suspicious when he was coming home late from class. I understand he'd have to stay over sometimes and counsel with the professor, but it became a nightly thing. And considering the professor was a guy, there was no reason for Tim to smell like cheap body spray when he got home. I finally decided that I was going to go through his school bag one day when he was at the gym. I know it was wrong, but this was the man I was set to marry. If there was a chance he was cheating, shouldn't I find out? And if he wasn't, all I did in the end was go through some undergrad's crappy essays. Well, it turns out that those essays were most definitely crappy, especially Taylor's, but in the margins of hers with the most adorable little love notes I'd ever seen. That is, ever since the ones he wrote to me in college. I couldn't believe it. What kind of a creepy perv weirdo freak writes love notes to students on their essays? And what kind of a girl is into that? More than one, I was about to find out, because at the bottom of the stack, I found an essay by some girl named Stephanie, with even more notes written on it. And some of these were too disgusting for me to repeat. So yeah, my fiancé was cheating on me with multiple girls, and they were students of his. Basically all of my worst fears had now been completely realized. Some women would break down, others would explode. But me? I just went cold. My blood froze in my veins. I decided to bide my time, to give it a night and see how I felt in the morning. Either I would confront him, or I would do what I really wanted to do. I woke up at 3 a.m., my heart beating out of my chest. I looked over at Tim. He was fast asleep on his stomach, the streetlight reflecting off the small of his smooth back. What if I could forgive him? That's possible, right? But for that to happen, he would need to actually be contrite. To actually admit what he's done and want to change. Was the damage done? Was trust broken? My sister always says, one a cheater, always a cheater. I have to say, it has a nice ring to it. And if this is how he's behaving while we're just engaged, while he's only a TA, what's it going to be like when we're married and he's an actual professor? My heart was broken. I was angry, but I was mostly just disappointed. I didn't know what to do or how to address the issue. Our lives were already so connected by that point. Would I move out or him? The lease was in my name, the cars were too. But none of that mattered to me then. All I wanted was to reverse the clock, to unlearn the terrible knowledge that my fiancé was a cheater. Unfortunately, life and time don't work that way. And the stages of grief are a very real thing. But the thing that nobody tells you about them is that they aren't really stages. You kind of go through all of them at different times, or sometimes all at once. And sometimes you may think you're done with one phase, but you end up right back on it. But for me, I only got to the anger stage, the red hot rage stage, and stayed there, when girl number 3 entered the picture just a few days later. And she wasn't just some student of his. She was Nina, my best friend. The best friend who introduced us all those years ago. I admit that finding out this information meant doing a little more than going through Tim's bag. I actually had to go through his laptop, okay? You can judge me all you want, but the fact of the matter is, I came up with pay dirt in the most shocking possible way. Nudes of Nina, hundreds of them, taken by her and by him. Of course I didn't go through all of them, but it was pretty obviously her based on the fact that the folder was labeled Nina. And by the way, there were about a dozen other folders next to it as well. Sarah, Amanda, Leah, Kylie, the list goes on. But there was another folder with niñas labeled Nina plus Tim. It was then that I realized that I not only had to take a picture of this screen, I had to get myself tested as soon as possible. But after that bit of nasty business was taken care of, I decided to slowly plan my revenge. If they had merely been strangers that Tim had been cheating on me with, just some ditzy college girl that I could convince myself he didn't love, maybe I could have at least just broken up with him and moved on. But this was Nina. This was my best friend since freshman year of college. And not only that, she was the one who introduced him and I. My mind began to race. How long had it been going on between the two of them? Has it always been? And who else knew? The more I felt like a fool, the more I felt humiliated and embarrassed, the angrier and angrier I got. Our engagement party is next Friday night. While everyone's been busy putting the final touches on our party, I've been planning one of my own. It's a coming out party, and I'll be throwing it at the exact same time. I'll be coming out to my friends and family as newly single, and I guess it'll come as quite the surprise to Tim and Nina as well. Especially when I tell everyone everything Tim has been up to, and who knows, maybe even throw a few of their homemade pics into the family photo slideshow. But I had plenty of things to do before then. Like breaking the lease on our apartment, for instance. We just resigned 2 months ago, and like I said, the place is in my name. Well, was in my name. He'll have to forfeit the rest of the year's rent to the owners, but hey, guess he shouldn't have cheated, right? I can't say I'm too proud of how I accomplished this, but let's just say I have a friend in the head office and Tim's signature is very easy to forge. I just closed on a house. A little cottage about 3 towns over, which is actually closer to my job anyway. I've always wanted a little house like this, and the small size is exactly the point. There's far less of a chance of me taking his sorry ass back if I didn't have room for it. The moving trucks are scheduled to arrive the morning after the party, but all of his stuff will already be waiting for him by the time he gets back. You might think all of this is a bit elaborate, but what would you have me do? Cancel my engagement party? Believe me, if you saw what his parents paid to be on the menu, you'd hang in there a few more weeks too. I think there's going to be some kids at the engagement party, so I feel a little bad about planning to show their homemades at the party. But maybe I can give some kind of a trigger warning first. Now, when it comes to my dear old friend Nina, I would make sure that everyone in her office knew what kind of a person was by a timed email. It would be sent at exactly the same time as the party, when I'd give my own little speech about the bestie who introduced me to the love of my life. I guess you can see, I don't do very well with betrayal, but I feel like my entire world has been thrown into upheaval. I know that deep down, I'm going to look back on my plan of public shame and humiliation with nothing but guilt and remorse. I mean, I should be a bigger person, right? I should take the high road and just move on with my life. But every time I thought about that, I thought about all those people who would look at this situation and just decide to feel sorry for me. They see me as the victim no matter what. I was the one who got cheated on, after all. Look at the poor bride-to-be, left at the altar. Because even if that's not the story, that's always what it will become. There's nothing people love more than a broken-hearted bride. Well, I'm not going to give them the satisfaction. I'm going to take the power back. I'm going to control my own future and destiny. And I'm going to make this one engagement party that absolutely no one will forget. Update 1. Well, everyone, the party is starting and everything is set to go. I have a group email ready to send to Nina's entire office telling them the whole story. I decided at the last minute not to include the nudes, at least for her office. They're definitely still in the PowerPoint presentation, which I have right here on the same thumb drive I used to use for my own English papers. I can see everyone beginning to stream in. Dear God, Tim's Aunt Ethel made it? She's like 96. Well, he's made his choices. Now he's going to have to live with the consequences. Like having to go to his parents and beg them for money, for instance. Because if Tim finds himself light on cash and needing to use the ATM, he quickly finds his card declined. Because I put my money back where it belongs, in my bank account. I hate that this is the person I've become. A vengeful, mean, hateful, petty person. But I've never been cheated on before, and I've never been betrayed by my best friend. To have them both happen at the same time pushed me completely over the edge. I guess I should probably go out there and start greeting people at a certain point. You know what? Let Tim go out there and do it. He can tell them that I'm on the toilet for all I care. It's not like I'll be seeing any of these people ever again, if you know what I mean. It's not like I'll be seeing them at my wedding. I'll give you guys an update when I can, but things may be a little too crazy for me to get to my phone for a while. I am going to go through with this. Just watch me. Update 2. So, it's been 1 day since the engagement party massacre, as I heard the banquet hall staff are now calling it, and I'm apparently now a meme. That's right, a banquet server took a video of my little speech detailing the exploits of Tim and Nina, and by morning it had 3 million views. Of course, he had to blur the images that were up on the overhead projector screen. He didn't want his video to get taken down off of YouTube after his channel got monetized just for that one video. Hey, I was happy to help the kid out. I waited until the party was at a fever pitch for my big announcement. Just when the booze was flowing and people were feeling the love, I announced that the bride had an announcement. I first thanked my maid of honor, the one and only Nina, for throwing this party for me. I told her that she's always been there for me, and that without her, none of us would be here today. I then turned to my former love, and told him that while I once loved him very much, I simply couldn't marry someone who couldn't take a decent nude of my friend. And then I asked for the lights to be dimmed and the slideshow began. It didn't take more than one picture for my point to get across in glaring detail. In fact, all it took was one for complete pandemonium to break out. There were shouts of outrage throughout the entire banquet hall, and of course more than a few outbursts of laughter from the younger members. I shut off the pictures and silenced the room. You should have seen me up there. You would have never guessed that I flunked public speaking twice. Once my audience had been hushed, I gave them a detailed account of their golden boy Tim's extracurricular activities. I showed the photos of Taylor and Stephanie's essays, and close-ups of the cute little love notes left in the margins. I showed the screenshots of the files on his computer, with all the girls' names lined up neatly in alphabetical order. I hadn't even looked at Tim or Nina during any of this. I honestly didn't even know if they were still in the room. Of course, it was then that I realized, much too late, that there was a strong chance that Nina herself didn't know about all of these other girls either. And I soon got my answers to all of the above. Suddenly there was commotion in the back, and I heard Nina's unmistakable Minnie Mouse voice squealing in rage. It turns out that she didn't know about the other women in Tim's life either, and she didn't take too kindly to finding out about them. In fact, she'd taken a folding chair and smashed it over his head, professional wrestling style. I have to hand it to her. I'm surprised that the 105-pound Nina can even lift a folding chair over her head, much less land such a deciding blow with it. But Tim was out completely cold by the emergency exit, which at least made him easily retrievable when paramedics were called in to check him out. So as you may have guessed, the wedding is most definitely off. I'm now in my little cottage, surrounded by boxes and taking a break from unpacking with a tall glass of champagne. We had plenty left over from the party. It ended a little bit early, big surprise. I guess Tim will be okay. They took him to the hospital and kept him overnight for evaluation. His sister texted me and told him it was a mild concussion. She also apologized to me for everything, but I of course told her it wasn't her fault. Nina's been blowing up my phone to the point of me having to shut it off. I want nothing to do with her. Absolutely zero. I'm sure that she'll find out where I live eventually, but until then, maybe I should just change my number. You know, they say the best revenge is living well. But sitting here in my cozy little house, and feeling totally justified in everything I've done, I'd say I got my cake and ate it too.